Okay. We're live. Welcome, everyone, to our electronic 2022 Plan and Budget Development meeting. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing and everyone is participating electronically. I am present in Council Chamber along with Regional Chair Redmond. We have a long meeting ahead of us, so I will ask councillors to keep your questions and statements succinct and to the point. I will call for a 15-minute break at around 3:30. Perhaps a bit later when we are between items. So I'd like a motion to reconvene into open session, please. This motion is made by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Armstrong. And use your icons, please. God bless you, Councillor Shantz. So carried. Thank you. I would look to Will to complete the roll call.
Thanks, Councillor Howitt. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton. Councillor Galloway.
Here.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Jowett.
Here.
Councillor Kiefer. Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor McGarry. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Shantz. Councillor Strickland. Councillor Verbanovic.
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Rentz.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share the land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I am looking to see if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, I have some quick opening remarks, if you'll indulge me, and we'll get going on this very long. No, it's not. It's going to be a medium day. It's going to be a medium day. Good afternoon. We have a lot on the agenda to get through today. This agenda builds on our 2022 plan and budget process to date. One of the first items is user rates and fees, something we've looked in at depth last time we met. And then, of course, this is our first real opportunity to dive into the 2022 operating budget, and staff have brought forward a set of important policy decisions for us to consider as part of that process. So they've nicely delineated the policy for us to pay attention to. And today also provides an opportunity to circle back on some of the pressing items brought forward to our committee from earlier in the year. So I'm eager to address those, as I'm sure you are. And before we get into the details, it is important to reflect that our decisions aren't always easy ones. Community needs are growing and changing faster than our fiscal means. I've heard a number of times around this horseshoe that we've got to be mindful of our mandate and our jurisdictional boundaries. And I'm hoping today helps us with that balance. I've asked staff to prepare a focused presentation with more detailed information available to support our discussion. So let's get on with the task at hand. I look forward to the information and the dialogue from each and every one of you. So we're going to start with the user rate budget approval. I'm looking to you, Mr. Dyer, to start us off, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. A very brief outline for you today, picking up on the presentations and material that were provided back on November 1st when we went through our detailed review of the proposed 2022 user rate budgets. Of course, this comprises our wholesale operations relating to water supply and wastewater treatment, and in addition, the retail water distribution and wastewater collection provided to the townships of Wellesley and North Dumfries. As we went through last time, just a quick overview of the proposed rate increases, which are 2.9% for water supply, wastewater treatment, as well as wastewater collection, and a 1.9% proposed increase for water distribution. We provided this summary last time of some of the, a bit of a history of the water supply rate changes, as well as looking ahead to what our modeling is telling us. Of course, we're coming off of a year, 2021, where there was no change made to the user rates, 2.9% proposed for 2022 and projected annually for the next 4 years. On the wastewater treatment side, again, 0% in 2021, 2.9% this year, and a range of 3.9 and 2.9% increases over the balance of the modeling. And as we discussed last time, we update our modeling on an annual basis. So this is what this year's model is projecting. Of course, we'll have a whole series of updates, both operating and capital, as we head into the next iteration. So from a distribution and collection perspective, again, the rate increases are in line with what our modeling had suggested in 2021 for the 2022 fiscal year. And of course, these are rate changes that would come into effect on January 1st. Again, staying with our distribution and collection monthly charges, no change proposed on the water distribution side, a $1 a month increase recommended on the wastewater collection side. Overall, sorry, this slide here shows the overall rate revenue requirement for each of the various budgets, increasing a little more significantly on the water supply side, less so with respect to wastewater treatment. And as we discussed last time, we have had some challenges in meeting the flow estimates in the budget. So we've made a downward adjustment to flow estimates in the wastewater treatment wholesale budget for 2022. From a capital perspective, we have a $1 billion 10-year capital program for water and wastewater funded from a combination of the user rates themselves, as well as development charges, where we have a growth-related component. From a debt financing perspective, relatively small and very manageable proportions of the capital spend estimated to be funded and financed from borrowing, 4% on the user rate side, 18% on the development charges side. And we believe that this is indicative of long-term financial sustainability within the water and wastewater models. And so overall, through you, Madam Chair, the council direction in respect of the water and wastewater rates has been met, below 3% in most cases, and in one case closer to 2%. We've made a number of adjustments to our modeling to reflect our capital programs. The debt projection, particularly on the wastewater side, is much improved over the last years due to some reprofiling of the capital program. And as we indicated last time, on the non-growth portion of water will be debt-free at the end of 2021, with no new debt anticipated until 2027. And with that, Madam Chair, we'll just turn to the approval. There are two sets of recommendations within the agenda today on pages 5 and 6, one for the wholesale budgets, one for the retail budgets. And if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. We'll be looking to see if there are any questions thus far. Okay, so that being said, I'd like to, there's two motions we need to pass, obviously. I will now call for a motion to approve the wholesale water supply and wastewater treatment rates. And I'm looking for a motion and a seconder. So it's hard for me to see the, can we flip this down for just a second? Oh, okay, because they're not showing up here. Councillor Clark and Councillor Foxton, and all those in favor, please use your icons. And that is carried. Thank you so much for that. Okay, and so would you like to continue, or shall I? Oh, right, the retail one, I'm sorry. So can we place that up as well, or do we have that back up? I'm looking for the motion for that as well. And I see Chair Redmond, seconded by, thank you, Councillor Erb. All those in favor? Thanks, Julie. And that's also carried. Thank you. All right. Okay. So staff will now take us through a presentation outlining the proposed 2022 operating budget and a series of associated key policy decisions that I referred to earlier. Some of the policy decisions are contained within the presentation, and others come with formal staff recommendations that are outlined in our agenda for us to consider. Please hold all of your questions until the end of the presentation. Once the presentation is complete, we are going to circle back through the presentation and address each of the policy decisions that need to be made. The more direction that we can give to staff today, the better. So that will, however, we will have meetings scheduled for December 8th and the 15th. So I'm going to entertain motions to defer any of the policy decisions or recommendations to those meetings if the committee requires additional information of staff. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Okay, so Bruce, would you like to commence, please?
Great. Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to present today. There's many reasons why I'm proud to be the CAO of the region of Waterloo, but I have to say a highlight for me over the past year was the ambitious plan that Council approved last year around this time. The region's 2021 plan and budget, which we titled Beyond COVID-19, positioned the organization and the community to get through the pandemic while making strategic investments in our future to help us emerge from COVID-19 much stronger than we went in. At a time when it would have been easy to just maintain the status quo or double down on immediate needs, this council inspired us to do more. You inspired us to focus on those facing the greatest barriers in our community. You inspired us to accelerate the creation of affordable housing from 50 units a year to more than 500. You inspired us to put our funding where our values are, investing in the social and economic health and well-being of Indigenous, Black, racialized, and other marginalized communities. You inspired us to look at modernizing service delivery through artificial intelligence and automation so we could free up staff time to do what they do best, support people. You inspired us to position our local economy for success and support small and medium-sized businesses through one of the toughest years they have ever faced. I'm incredibly proud of how far we've come. This wasn't easy. It required tough decisions. And these decisions, I know, were not taken lightly by you. They did, however, enable us to look at how we provide services differently to support even more people in our community on their needs throughout 2021. This year's budget is no different. It has and does require difficult choices. Looking at all that has been achieved this past year, while rolling out a life-saving vaccine and undergoing the most complex logistical operation in our lifetime, I have to say that staff have done tremendous work. They've spent considerable time planning for the future and laying out a plan and budget that supports Council's direction to provide service and address the issues of 2022. It's hard to believe we're saying those words, 2022. If we can go to the next slide, please. In developing this budget, we took into consideration the key principles that Council endorsed in June and provided to us as direction. We've taken a hard look at the community's priorities and how we can maximize our resources to deliver on those priorities. Staff have worked very hard to find efficiencies and to maintain affordability. We've worked across teams to be as creative as possible, and we've worked to maintain service levels for the services that residents rely on each and every day. We've also looked at the long-term financial health of our organization and our region and sustainability for the future so that we can sustain the services we have and prepare for increasing demands in 2022 and the years ahead. We've worked to stay within our mandate and to elevate the role of strategic partnerships with other levels of government, with community, and with business wherever it made sense. And we've considered it with our people in mind to ensure that they are well supported as they come out of the pandemic, tired and exhausted, and yet ready to face the challenges of 2022. This is incredibly complex work in an organization of thousands of employees providing so many services to 630,000 people each and every day. Our plan for 2022 builds on the success of 2021, and I'm very proud of the work that staff have done to get us here today. I'm now going to turn it over to Chief Strategy Officer Connie MacDonald to provide a brief overview of the plan.
Thank you, Bruce. The region's proposed 2022 plan and budget continues to make critical investments in immediate priorities while laying the foundation for the world-class Waterloo region of the future. The plan builds on momentum from 2021 to accelerate affordable housing and support those facing the greatest housing barriers, to expand active transportation and invest in foundational work to address the climate crisis, to support businesses and drive economic growth, to transform regional services and work alongside community to improve the social and economic health and well-being of Black, Indigenous, racialized, and marginalized communities, to deliver on the region's commitment to reconciliation, to modernize services to improve the resident experience, and to maintain service levels for those critical regional services. I'd like to especially highlight the last point because maintaining services doesn't always sound as exciting as new programs and developments, but these are the services residents rely on every single day. It's making sure when you need emergency medical care that a paramedic is able to come to your home, that when you turn your tap on, that clean, safe drinking water comes out, that waste and recycling are picked up at your home. It's having safe roads to drive on and traffic signals that you can rely on. It's long-term care, senior services, childcare, public transit, museums, libraries, income and employment supports. I could go on and I really want to. But the important point is that the region's plan for next year reflects what is most important to the community. Next slide, please. And how do we know that? Because we're listening. You have a detailed report in your package on the plan and budget community engagement results. We presented the interim results in October, and now we've heard from almost 1,500 community members, in addition to the engagement done by our partners and by staff every day. A few high-level takeaways are on the screen. The most important focus area of our strategic plan was environment and climate action. However, the others followed very closely. When asked what services were most important, the most frequently mentioned were related to sustainable transportation and healthy, safe, and inclusive communities. This represents many of the critical services that regional staff have worked so hard to maintain. Lastly, we continue to hear from residents that most support increased taxes to maintain or expand services, while only 8% opted to reduce taxes and services. While we know this isn't fully representative of the community, and we're continuing to work on expanding and improving our engagement, it provides some critical insights into our community's priorities. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Dyer to present an overview of the 2022 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you, Madam Chair and regional councillors. It's a pleasure to present to you the preliminary 2022 operating budget for the region of Waterloo. Just wanted to start with a slide similar to the one that was previously shown around the 2021 budget, and as you know, to try to describe the 2022 plan and budget process would take some time to do. I can say that it was a collaborative and cooperative effort of hundreds of people across the region, and I'm honored to present it to you today. As we put the budget together, of course, a number of different factors were taken into account as we brought this package together. Most significantly, the evolving expectations and disparities within our community. So recognizing that the services that we provide need to provide meaningful outcomes for our residents. We're a region that is experiencing and will continue to experience significant population and employment growth. And that has an impact certainly on our capital program and ultimately on our operating budget as well. As Ms. MacDonald indicated about the everyday essential services, not meant to be an all-encompassing list, but certainly the essential services that we've been providing will continue, water and wastewater, a range of social and community services, public health, waste management, public transit, roads, and active transportation. And in addition, staff are proposing significant new investments in a variety of areas, most notably housing and homelessness, which is, I would say, the most significant area of investment in the 2022 budget. And not surprising, it has consistently come out as one of the top, if not the top, priorities for this community. Continuing our investments in equity, diversity, and inclusion that were started in the 2021 budget, a plan to implement our climate action program, expanded public transit hours, as I mentioned earlier, as well as improved or additional resources with respect to our paramedic service response times, expanding our active transportation network, and of course expanding our airport capacity through projects that are underway right now as the passenger volumes increase exponentially at the airport. With all of that also comes capital assets valued at over $7 billion, and our budget and plan contemplates the ongoing renewal and expansion to our capital assets so that we can continue to deliver regional services in a growing community at the same time as ensuring that we are on a path to long-term financial sustainability. And of course, we're doing all this in a highly uncertain and volatile economic environment that we talked about back on November the 1st. Housing unaffordability continues to be a major issue. Cost escalation, we're seeing price inflation right now at a level that hasn't been seen in close to 20 years. A tenuous economic recovery, interest rates that are rising, unemployment falling, still significant deficits on the operational side at both the federal and provincial governments. And so our 2022 budget, which we're going to start to work through today, proposes a 4.4% increase in property taxes for regional services. So this excludes the Waterloo Region Police Service, but captures all other services other than water and wastewater, for which you've already approved those budgets for 2022. We have a number of updates to user fees and charges that we will go through today. And importantly, continuing and in some cases enhancing the strategic investments that were started last year. And I'll start right off with just a summary on assessment growth. At 1.57%, if we can move to the next slide, you can see a summary of what this has looked like. 6 weeks ago, we were in the 1.3% range, but saw an additional 0.25 point get added between September and the end of October when the roll closed. So a little bit below what the average has been, certainly an improvement over what we saw in the 2021 budget. And we'll provide more information about assessment growth in a briefing note at the December meeting. The overall regional budget, again, excluding Waterloo Region Police Services, projected at $884 million in 2022, with a property tax levy of just under $420 million. That represents a 6% increase over the levy in 2021. In terms of the overall tax impact, I mentioned earlier the 4.4%. You see that in the bottom right-hand corner of this table. Included in this budget is a recommended affordable housing levy of $5.8 million. I'll explain shortly how that funding would be used. And of course, this is an increase over what was approved in principle by Council last January and recommended to be included in the 2022 budget. You can also see here where assessment growth comes in. So if we look at the bottom row here, a 6.1% increase in the levy, but after taking into account assessment growth in terms of a tax impact for direct regional services, that comes in at 4.4%. Now the math just gets just a little bit tricky, so if you'll pardon the math lesson for just a moment, it's a nuance, but it's an important one. So this slide shows you the budget as it currently stands. Again, you can see the levy change of $24 million. It's a 4.4% increase on the region's portion of the upper tier tax bill, so excluding police. So the way the math works then is, since the regional levy comprises 68% of the total, we do a weighted average and basically say, okay, 4.4% on the region's portion will mean a 3% increase on the overall regional tax bill, being mindful that that does not include police services. And the committee will receive a presentation on the 2022 police services budget next Monday, and then we'll be able to provide a more comprehensive view of the budget as a whole. So this is on the region's portion of the upper tier levy, translates into an overall 3% tax increase. I hope that math makes sense to people. Included in this budget is a long list of efficiencies and reductions, and we thought it would be helpful just to provide some context to what the last several years have looked like in terms of the region's ongoing review of savings and efficiencies in each year's budget. This is an annual part of our budget. It's been this way certainly ever since I've been at the region, and this is coming on 10 years now. And notably in this table, you'll see the significant work that was undertaken in the 2021 budget. $13 million of savings overall between the tax-supported and user rate budgets. That translated into approximately 160 full-time equivalent positions. So a significant effort made last year, and an effort that was repeated this year. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that efficiencies and cost savings across all regional departments, ranging from meetings and mileage to consulting fees to looking at levels of staffing and looking at how we use overtime, looking at our utilities and new user fees, and a couple of specific service level adjustments, which we'll get to with respect to the KPMG service review, which includes a review of our discretionary grants, as well as a recommended discontinuation of the multi-residential waste management rebate, which would achieve, if approved, would achieve a savings of about $1.9 million and would allow for a reallocation of funding to other areas of great importance to council, as set out in the strategic plan and as discussed in the draft business plan for 2022. So again, a significant effort undertaken this year in order to meet an extremely challenging budget. In terms of some of our user fees and charges, and we do have a staff report on the agenda today that outlines where some of those more significant changes have been made. I would say that the two most significant from a budget perspective, and it's not so much a change in the fee as it is a change in volumes. So we are anticipating a continued increase in public transit fares totaling about $8.6 million. And at the airport, additional non-tax revenues of about $8.3 million due to the significant increase in passenger volumes anticipated at the airport in 2022. We'll provide a little bit more context to this in just a moment. So transit ridership, interesting chart here, shows you the challenges that we faced with respect to the delivery of a public transit system during a global pandemic. So this shows you our ridership actuals in 18, 19, and 20. You can see the approximately 50% drop going into 2020. 2021 projection right now is less than 2020 actuals and less than what we budgeted for in 2021, which you can see as the first green bar there. So we don't believe we're going to hit our targets for 2021. That being said, we continue to be optimistic about economic recovery and a return to transit ridership over 2022, and have budgeted for a further increase both relative to the 2021 budget and the 2021 projection, but still below our pre-pandemic levels in 2018 and 2019. We also, as outlined in the staff report today, increases planned for, or proposed rather, with respect to transit fares. I believe the last increase in transit fares was in 2019, might be 2018, I'll confirm that. Cash fare proposed to increase by 25% on July 1st of 2022. Overall, it varies from fare, it varies among the fare structure, but overall, it reflects about a 2% increase in the transit fare planned for 2022. And then I've mentioned airport a couple of times already. A very telling slide, you'll see actual passenger volumes through 18-19, under 100,000, dropping off significantly in 2020. Rapid rebound in the last several months for 2021. So a projection that will hit 200,000 this year, and then a projection for 2022 that's just south of 800,000. So that significant increase in volumes is translating into the significant increase in revenue that we saw on the previous slide. So overall, user fees and charges, we tried to provide a high-level overview here of what's in the staff report. It's an information report today. Any revisions to the user fees and charges will get approved on December the 15th, along with the overall budget. Perhaps the one I've already spoken to, transit services, waste management, proposed increases to tipping fees on April the 1st. And the library board will be considering a recommendation to eliminate overdue charges. This is a trend that's been seen in a number of library systems across the province and across the country. And that is something that the library board will consider when they meet in December to review their budget, and that will subsequently come forward to council. It wouldn't be a budget without talking about risks, and there are some risks in this budget. We've tried to capture them here for you. We went through some of this a couple of weeks ago, but a couple bear repeating. And this is in some order of risk. I would say the most significant risk we have right now is funding from the province for our shelter system beyond March 31st. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but the clear message from the province has been that the Social Services Relief Fund will end on March 31st of next year. In our 2022 budget, we have made the assumption that additional provincial funding for the shelter system will come. And that's about a $3 million risk that we've identified, that we've purposefully, if you will, budgeted in that way. We think that there is still room for the provincial and federal governments to provide funding for the shelter system beyond March 31st. There will be little interest in going back to a pre-COVID level of service, and that requires funding. And we believe that there's a role for the provincial and federal governments to play, and I believe at its last meeting, committee passed a motion with respect to advocacy to the province in this regard. Passenger volumes are perhaps a bit of a risk. That huge increase from 2021 to 2022, we've estimated just under 800,000, and that's something that we'll be reporting back to council as we go through 2022. Ongoing COVID containment costs, particularly at Sunnyside, and some uncertainty around provincial funding. Fuel prices and other price escalation has been a significant factor, could continue to be in 2022 relative to the estimates that we've made. Capital cost inflation is another one that we should mention, impacting a number of our projects, and to the extent that property is being acquired, escalating land values. The other one I'll just mention here, transit service levels. We made assumptions in 2021, I think in the range of 55% of pre-COVID levels. As you saw on the previous slide, we're not going to get there. There's some risk to how we budgeted in 2022, but we also have safe restart funding that we know will help us through the balance of next year. So I'm just going to pause there. That's the first part of the presentation. Before we go into some of the policy and decisions that we'll want to run through with council today. Perhaps, Madam Chair, that would be a good place to pause and see if there are any questions from councillor on the overview of the budget.
I see we already have questions, so if you'll, Councillor Galway, please, you are first.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Craig, Connie, and Bruce for the presentation so far. First, I want to thank staff for the great work that they've done getting us to this point, although there's some work yet to be done, obviously, and some time to travel. But particularly, like, of course, how we align the strategic plan with the budget. Two specific questions, Craig. The $5.8 million for affordable housing, and refer to it maybe as a special levy or for housing, which you've identified equaling 1.4%. That really does require some explanation, I think, in terms of 1.4%. 1% is $6 million. 1.4% would equate to something more than $5.8 million. Maybe you could explain that.
Yes, I can certainly give it a try, and perhaps I'll ask for the slide to go back to where we showed the tax impact. Yeah, right here. Thank you so much. So you're absolutely right. So a 1% increase or decrease on the overall tax bill, region and police combined, represents $5.8 million, so just under $6 million. What we're showing here is the impact on just the region's, let's say, the non-police portion of the tax bill. So 5.8 million is 1% on the total tax bill, region and police. But because we're putting that 5.8 million over a smaller base, then it translates into 1.4%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand that. But I'm curious about the reason for doing so.
Yes, so I can explain the reason, and perhaps we'll just jump forward a few slides then into the policy section, because I do have one slide that covers it, which is this one right here. So the reason for the 5.8 million recommendation, twofold. So first of all, half of the 5.8 million, being 2.9 million, would go towards the development and construction of a new housing supply, so new affordable housing units. This is the 2.9 million that was approved in principle by council last January for inclusion in the 2022 budget. The other half, the remaining 2.9 million, would to a great extent go towards funding additional service levels within the emergency shelter and housing stability system. And this is, to a great extent, the recommendations coming out of the point-in-time report, which came before Committee of the Whole on November 9th. And you may recall that the recommendations in that report were adopted and referred to Budget Committee for consideration. So our challenge overall within the budget was we just did not feel that there was capacity to add another $2.5 million within the budget as it stood. And so the $2.9 million levy approved in principle, staff are now recommending that rather it being 2.9, it's 5.8. Half of it going to the development of new affordable housing, the other half going to support the shelter system and ongoing service levels into 2022.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. I certainly support the direction. I think we have to understand how you're calculating the numbers, and that's quite fine. The other question I had of two questions, Madam Chair, was on airport revenues. You're projecting for significant increases in airport revenues. And And of course, we've made a commitment to the community that we're not going to go over $26 per household for the support of the airport. So, two-part question then is: are we able to maintain that commitment given these new revenues? I suspect so. And how are the new revenues going to be deployed? Are they deployed against airport costs in terms of some of the debenturing that we've done and capital costs that we're incurring, or do they find their way back into the levy somehow?
So through you, Madam Chair, it's a great question, and you answered part of it as you went through it. I'd say, a two-part answer then. The first in terms of the cost per household and the projections that were made at the time that the airport master plan was originally approved. I can say absolutely the answer to are we able to maintain that commitment on the cost per household? Absolutely. In fact, you'll see in the 2022 budget a fairly significant reduction in that cost per household, which leads me to the second part of the answer, which is in terms of how we use that additional revenue, we use it in a number of different ways. We use it to offset or to fund, if you will, the additional, I'd say, non-growth related debt servicing costs. The capital infrastructure that's needed to support this additional passenger volume is partly funded from development charges and partly by the property tax. And so we use that additional revenue to offset the debt servicing costs on the property tax side. Also, the revenue will also go towards offsetting the additional operating costs associated with the expanded operations at the terminal. Thinking back to the staff report that came forward back in the spring of this year, there were a number, I think over 20 new staff positions that were added in order to operate the terminal at a level to accommodate this level of passenger growth. So revenues will also offset those costs and to some extent also offset the overall levy for the airport. There is still an operating levy that's part of the budget. It's significantly reduced from last year, but this is, and in previous years, but this is exactly what we were hoping for in terms of these additional revenues. The other small piece to this is we have an airport capital program that I would say is sustainably funded now through the Airport Capital Reserve and through the use of long-term borrowing where it's appropriate, which is where we're expanding the airport infrastructure.
And one supplementary, Madam Chair, on the airport, these numbers, these projected volumes, passenger volumes, Mr. Dyer, are they based on what we currently know actually occurring, announced passenger volumes, or do they actually include any projections for things we also know might be in the hopper?
So through you, Madam Chair, I might look to either Mr. Regier or Mr. Wood to help me out with this one. My sense is that that the answer to your question is that we've budgeted based on what is known. We haven't been speculative as to what might be announced over the course of next year. So it's much more along the lines of here's what's been announced, here's what we know is coming, and we've budgeted that way rather than trying to speculate on what might happen in the future. But perhaps one of my colleagues would like to expand on that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm what Mr. Dyer is saying. The assumptions that we've made in terms of airport revenues based on known flight commitments that have actually already been brought to council. So we we have not been speculating in the airport related budget whatsoever. I mean, there's always some risk, of course, that market conditions will change, and particularly with regard to conditions related to the pandemic, economic conditions across the country. But right now, council is aware of everything that's built into the budget.
Okay, thank you. Just one further thing, sorry, Madam Chair, to Mr. Dyer, and further to what Mr. Azure just said, it's risky to project, additional service, additional passengers, additional revenues. But is there an opportunity there, Mr. Dyer, to when we get to budget day, to look at this particular line, if we're looking for opportunities to make some adjustments, downward adjustments, I guess you'd say, on the levy increase, that this might be an area that we could look at, or would additional revenues over and above what you're projecting be already committed to other purposes?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's something that if council wished, we could take another look at. We looked at it repeatedly through the development of the budget process and made a number of changes as we went along. That being said, I could certainly have the discussion with Mr. Regier and Mr. Wood at the airport. And bring something back for council to consider and identify any risks associated with making any further adjustments.
I'm not asking for you to do that, Mr. Dyer, but I just wanted to know whether or not if there were additional revenues, would they fall to the bottom line?
I would say for the most part, the answer to that would be yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galway. And so I just want to quickly reiterate, every time anybody comes off their screen and goes back on, it moves all the window panes around. So we're not bypassing anyone. I just want to make sure we're very clear about that. That's not something I'm interested in doing. So if anybody goes off, that means anybody who is on this call goes off or comes back on, the panes all change and it looks like the person who's next also changes. I have a list here that you can also access from your computer, and it shows the participant list. And I have Will poking at me to make sure that I am doing that correctly. So I can assure you all that is not going to happen. Okay. Mr. Jaworski, would you like to take the floor?
I would, considering there's such an awesome chair doing the job right now. And I actually only have one question, Craig, and I may have missed it while I was taking notes, and if not, I'd ask maybe we could have this in the future. We often talk about percentages of impacts and that, percentage of this, percentage of that. However, for the average homeowner, it's really dollars per year, or more importantly, dollars per month. And I'm just wondering if we have anything on the dollars per month impact, and if not, I wouldn't ask you to speculate now, but maybe we could get that in a future meeting to see how many dollars per month we're really talking about here for the average homeowner in Waterloo region.
So through you, Madam Chair, I believe the answer to the question is each percent is worth about $20. So $20 to $21. So a 3% increase on the total tax bill at $21 per percent would give you $63 per year.
So about $6 a month is what we're talking. Okay, thank you, Craig.
Okay, I see no other hands, so shall we proceed?
Yes, let's do that. So the second part of the slide deck is a number of slides with respect to some key policy decisions and areas that Council will need to consider in approving the 2022 budget. Not all of these decisions will need to be made today. There are a couple that we think Budget Committee should consider making today, but others that can be considered either on December 8th or on December the 15th. So if we move to the next slide, we're going to start off with equity. So you'll recall in the 2021 budget, one of the strategic investments was with respect to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Staff are proposing to continue that investment in the 2022 budget with funding of $10 million. And that would be funded $7.5 million from the tax levy and $2.5 million from the tax stabilization reserve. And then as we go into 2023, we would replace the tax stabilization reserve with levy funding. So it's a way of phasing in the impact over a couple of years. And listed here on the slide are a number of different areas that, that staff would propose in terms of the use of that funding. And Madam Chair, before I go on, what we were contemplating for this section was I'd run through each of the slides until the end, and then we'll come back and go through them in detail, if that makes sense. I think it'll be helpful for council to see the overall picture, and then we can go through these one at a time, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I like this approach. I think it's working well.
Okay, so bear with me. I'll try to work through the high-level overview relatively quickly, and hopefully that gives you a good sense of what's in the budget. We talked about this slide already. This is the housing and homelessness levy, again, recommended for $5.8 million, combination of delivery of new housing units and funding for the shelter system. And with respect to the shelter system, there is a set of recommendations that's before you today from the point in time count report that we'll be asking the committee to consider. And from a service level perspective, there were a few different options that were considered. The one that's been built into the 2022 budget is the one that we've referred to here as a moderation, if you will, in service levels. So it's not going back to pre-COVID service levels, but it's recognizing that with provincial and federal funding expiring on March 31st of 2022, that some change in service level needed to happen. So the recommendation from the point in time count report, add another $2.5 million funded from the levy. There is still a $3 million funding risk that we're planning for within the 2022 budget. And again, something that we'll have to monitor, and my hope is that council's advocacy efforts will prove successful. So we'll come back and go through this in a little bit more detail in a minute. Public transit, we've talked about ridership already. Included in the 2022 budget is a recommendation to expand service hours in the fall of 2022. This is predominantly for service in Cambridge. This was originally contemplated, I believe, back in 2020 when the 2020 budget was approved. Of course, this was pre-pandemic and those service expansions were not put in place. So that's now back in the 2022 budget. And you can see both the restoration of the university-related service hours in 21 and 2022, and then the increase for the Cambridge expansion. Overall, just worthy of note, the overall public transit budget in 2022 is approaching $200 million, of which 125 would fall to the property tax levy. Similarly, with respect to paramedic services, staff are recommending the continued implementation of additional resources as set out in the paramedic services master plan. 2021 included 3 12-hour ambulances effective July the 1st. So we have the annualization of that service level and cost into 2022, as well as a recommendation to implement another 2 12-hour ambulances effective July the 1st. From a levy impact, this would reflect about $439,000 in 2022 and annualized at $838,000. And the annualization here is due to 2 reasons. One is we go from July 1st in 2022, so a part year in 2022 to a full year in 2023. And we're also continuing our practice of using the tax stabilization reserve to phase in the provincial funding, which always has a one-year lag. The 2022 budget also includes a significant investment in terms of the region's response to climate change and actions that are recommended coming out of the declaration of the climate emergency in 2019 and the implementation of the Transform WR initiative in 2021. This would involve additional spending on both additional investment on both the operating and the capital side, 853,000 in operating funding, as well as about 1.7 million that's been reflected in the capital program. And I should have said at the outset, included in the slide deck in the appendix, in the appendices are additional information on all of these items, and we can go to that if needed. And if you just bear with me for 1 second. The next policy item we wanted to advise council of in terms of what's built into the 2022 budget. There was a staff report that came forward, I believe, at the last cycle with respect to review of multi-residential waste management collections. And staff are recommending through the budget the discontinuation of the current multi-residential rebate. This is a rebate that has been around for over 20 years. To our understanding, we're the only municipality in the province that offers such a rebate. We've provided here some of the rationale for discontinuing that rebate, and it really comes down to the purpose of the property tax. The property tax is not a user fee, but it funds services that are essentially a public good. And it's acknowledged that not everybody has access to or the need for access to every service. And as such, in order to provide some budget capacity for other priorities set out in the business plan, staff are recommending the discontinuation of that rebate at the end of this year. And again, we'll come back and go through this in a little bit more detail, but it's important for council to know that that's reflected in the budget numbers that we're presenting today. Discretionary grants to organizations. There's a staff report for committee's consideration on the agenda today. This is a follow-up to the KPMG service review, which identified grants as an option for the region to consider in terms of cost savings. Staff brought forward a report in the fall of 2020 to the Service Review Steering Committee. The Service Review Steering Committee's recommendation was that grants in 2021 remain at a status quo level, for lack of a better term, but also directed staff to review the way in which grants are approved and the grants program that we have. Staff are recommending a revised approach to the approval of grants and making sure that they have a clear connection to the region's strategic plan. We acknowledge that there are some grants that are awarded outside of any sort of formal program based on historical legacy. So a recommendation to you today to develop a comprehensive grant policy for the region, as well as the discontinuation of some grants and an increase in the level of municipal accommodation tax that's used to offset some of those costs. So overall, it produces a budget savings of $314,000, which is built into the 2022 budget. Again, a separate briefing note, and we'll come back to this in more detail before the day is out. The regional bunker, you may recall, if you cast your mind back to the summer and early fall, recommendations brought forward to committee were then taken to council, and then council referred the recommendations that you see before you to budget committee. So the directions to to staff to undertake some immediate repair work, some formal consultations with a view of ultimately using that site for some type of multi-purpose facility in the future. So right now, the preliminary capital program includes that remediation work within the facilities capital program, which, if approved, would take place in 2022. And then within the cultural services capital program, $4.5 million in 2023 and 2024 for the development of the multi-use facility at that location. If we go to the next slide, we have also a staff report on the agenda today with respect to Upstream investment and community collaboratives with a series of recommendations, including funding of $250,000 for Wellbeing Waterloo Region over a 2-year period, as well as direction to enter into an agreement with community justice initiatives to develop a community-based justice center. And again, this would be for funding over a 2-year period in the approximate amount of $575,000 a year, starting on April 1st of 2022. And then I believe finally, the final briefing note today it covers a grant request from the University of Waterloo for a $5 million capital grant from the region as part of its fundraising campaign for the Waterloo Eye Institute. There is a briefing note for Council's consideration today where we note no direct connection between the proposed work of the Institute and the mandate of Region of Waterloo Public Health. Also acknowledge that we have significant funding challenges with respect to our capital program as it stands, and staff's recommendation would be to take no action with respect to that capital grant. And before we go back to the start, just 2 slides on process, in case you're wondering how all of this fits into the overall budget process. We still have a series of meetings to go through. We have a public meeting tonight. We'll be back together on November 29th for a presentation on the police budget, and then back as budget committee to consider the budget as a whole on December the 8th, where we'll provide any updates to either the operating or capital budgets, any unfinished business from today, as well as responses to any councillor requests that come out of today's meeting, and then a 3rd public input meeting planned for December 8th, and then that would bring us to December 15th when approval of the 22 budget is contemplated. So with that, Madam Chair, we'll go back to the start of the key consideration, sorry, the key policy section of the presentation, and just start working our way through the reports that are on the agenda, as well as some of those recommendations.
And so we'll maintain the slide up there that we're actually discussing. Is that the idea?
Yes, yes, and I believe our first slide will be back to community engagement and the first staff report on the tax budget that appears on your agenda.
And so we're just looking to see if there are any questions or comments on this particular slide before we move forward through the policies. Is that correct for the second? Okay. And so I'm looking and I'm not seeing any. So I think everyone's comfortable with this. Can I see some heads shaking a little bit? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Just want to make sure I don't move too quickly here. Okay. And so we're here with the proposed changes to the fees and charges, and they are included on this list. And I'm just going to kind of keep looking over to the side to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Looks good. Okay. Okay, and so it's starting to look familiar now, right? The improving equity is up here now. Well, okay. Next. Oh, I can see you. Sorry, Councillor Galloway, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the improving equity, could we get at some time, and maybe we've had this recently and I forget, just an update on the initiatives to date, the costs that we've already incurred on this. I think we've done a substantial amount of work already, but a lot more to be done. So I'd just like to be reminded of that. Thank you.
Fair enough. Much appreciated. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like Mr. Dyer to explain again the allocation of funding beyond 22 for the $10 million that they're going to replenish the capital reserve fund in 23. Is that right?
Through you, Madam Chair. So just a brief recap. This strategic investment in equity was approved in the budget in 2021, $5 million funded from the levy. What we're proposing in 2022 is that we increase the funding available to $10 million. And so that's the $5 million that's in the levy already. We would add another $2.5 million from the levy and $2.5 million from the tax stabilization reserve. And then when we fast forward into the 2023 budget, the entire $10 million would be from the levy. So it's a way of phasing in the next $5 million over a 2-year period.
Okay, and so that extra, if I may, Madam Chair, so that extra 2.5 million in 23 would be about 0.75% on the tax levy. Then, if we sort of use the same kind of calculations we're using this year, is that right?
So it would be an additional 2.5 million. So it would represent about a third, maybe 0.4% on. So if 6 million is 1%, we're adding 2.5 million. So it's less than 0.5%.
Yeah. Okay. You're a better mathematician than I am. That's why you're the treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking at Councillor Verbanovich.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Mr. Dyer, on the presentation. Just as a follow-up to Councillor Galloway's request on the equity piece, when you bring forward the sort of how we've spent the money so far, can you also, in broad terms, bring forward how we expect the budget to be spent in 2022 as well, as part of the information coming to us, please? Thank you.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay. So now we're looking at Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Jowett. I got all excited thinking maybe Councillor Erb was actually going to move this. I just really want to voice my support for this ongoing funding. These expectations were actually, I think, established in last year's budget. This bakes it into the base budget, and that does come at a cost, but I think it's really a demonstration that Council's very serious about moving forward with improving equity. So I think this is a great piece of the budget.
Well, on that note, then I'll look for, no, I'll wait for the motion. Wait for the motion. No, we're not, we're just taking it forward, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Redmond. Okay, so next.
Next item, Madam Chair, is housing and homelessness. So again, 2 slides, one which covers off the 5.8 million proposal, and the second slide which deals with the proposed service levels that are baked into the 2022 budget. And at this point, Madam Chair, I think it would be appropriate for the committee to consider the recommendations referred to Budget Committee in the point-in-time report.
Okay. So that being said, I do have a hand up. So Councillor Erb, would you like to proceed, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to make that recommendation. I actually had another question going back on the previous slide to the rent assistance program for 200 families. And am I, my memory correct that amount could be anywhere up to $600 a month for a family going through a full year?
So through you, Madam Chair, I might look to one of my colleagues in housing to answer that specific question. And I think that the reference here is to a portion of the equity funds being used for a new rent supplement program. But perhaps there's someone from housing who can help us out with that.
I see Douglas is there. Douglas, would you like to speak to it?
I believe that Councillor Erb is correct, that it's a subsidy that could be up to $600 per month. Yes, up to $600 per month for 200 families in perpetuity, or at least the funding would run for as long as we decide that funding is going to run. So at the moment, it's an annualized amount that would run essentially in perpetuity, or until we decide that program, or until council decides that program is no longer going to be offered.
And that could follow the tenant from accommodation, like from one accommodation to the other, if it fits the guidelines.
That's correct. So it's attached to the client as opposed to the building they're in. Unlike some of our other subsidies where the subsidies are attached to the building. So if a client chooses to move from building A in Cambridge to building B in Waterloo, that subsidy would follow them to their new building.
Thank you. I think that's just a great step that we've taken to help people improve in housing, and not only will it improve their housing, but just many other things in their life if they get into better accommodation and address some of the other issues that they're dealing with. So I think this is a great initiative. Thank you.
Sorry? Oh, so Councillor Erb, can I ask that you move that motion? Would you like to do that?
I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Much appreciated. And I see Councillor Foxton is seconding that. Councillor Verbanovich, do you have a comment to make?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're only moving this to budget day, correct? Like that's not finalizing anything today.
Well, if there's anything that can be finalized, I think it would make things much easier for the next go-round if everyone's comfortable. Is there a reason that you would like to wait, Councillor Verbanovich?
Well, I just think that with budget, we really need to see the whole picture and then obviously make the appropriate adjustments as we go along. It would be fairly uncommon other than for fees, which often kick in at the start of the year for us to be approving stuff throughout the process and not actually, finalize it on final budget day.
Okay, so Mr. Dyer, would you like to comment on that, or shall we?
Well, I think, excuse me, Madam Chair, I think we're in your hands as to how you want to handle this. The report was brought to Committee of the Whole on November the 9th. The recommendations were supported, referred to Budget Committee, and are here for Budget Committee to consider. I think from a staff perspective, approving those recommendations today would make some sense. If it's council's preference to not do that today, then I think we're entirely in your hands.
Okay, so I see we are at a bit of a. Okay, Councillor,
Yeah.
would you like to comment on that?
It just
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't done, Madam Chair. I appreciate that response from staff, and I recognize there is some time-sensitive issues here in order to signal where we might be going. I guess I still am questioning whether or not there's some additional work that we need to be doing in this space. In fact, one of my questions for Mr. Bartholomew Saunders, as he's aware, this is an issue that has certainly been flagged by the City of Kitchener with regional staff in terms of not only ensuring that we have funding for the shelter programs as we continue to work through various discussions with new partners and so on, some of which we have been able to share already, some of which isn't completed yet. And so I think all of those pieces are part of that. But the other part that goes along with that is ensuring that the programming we have in place is not only looking at the overnight hours, but in fact what the impact is in each of our urban centers during the daytime and the daytime supports that are necessary, whether it's in downtown Gulf, downtown Kitchener, or uptown Waterloo. As we look at the shelter system, and I'm not clear that all of that is being addressed here yet.
Okay, so before we move on, Mr. Dyer, do you want to speak to the gaps, or what Mr.
So through you, Madam Chair, I don't feel capable of speaking to the gaps, but perhaps my colleague, Mr. Bartholomew Saunders, would like to.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Councillor Verbanovich. Your points are well taken. I did have the opportunity to correspond with Mr. Chapman today about these very issues. In addition to adding additional overnight shelters, which we're in the midst of negotiating right now, and because we're in the midst of negotiating them, I can't share the details about them yet, but we will share them with council as soon as we've concluded the negotiations. The issue of the hours between the time that shelters close in the morning or have their residents move on in the morning, and the time that other social service agencies open up in the morning, we've noted that gap. What we're doing at the moment, we're in negotiations with the agencies in downtown to try and close that gap. So whether that means that we negotiate with the other service providers to open earlier, so that places like St. John's Kitchen, Ray of Hope, or wherever are open earlier to be able to receive those clients sooner in the day, or we negotiate with the shelters to stay open later so that they close when the other agencies are open. We are in discussions, and we will work toward solving that gap. So there's ongoing work being done. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly yet, or at least we're not prepared to talk about the details of it yet, because we're still in negotiations. As soon as we have something nailed down, we'll be happy to share it with council.
So all of that will have budgetary impact. So will it not?
Yes, it will, and staff are trying to manage these within the envelope that we have. That said, we may have some additional costs related to sort of a couple of hours of the day in the morning where we need to stretch the services of one service or another.
So I think, Madam Chair, I think that's, that last response really speaks to my concern around, finally ratifying things today. If there's particular components that need, direction today in order to be able to move on them from a funding perspective, I'm prepared to deal with that. But anything else, I would ask that, we leave till budget day. And if you're looking for a formal motion to defer those components, I'm certainly prepared to move that. But as I said, it's my understanding that normally, decisions are finalized on budget day. That's been my experience in the past.
Okay, and so what I'm going to ask you to do is hold for a second. Mr. Lochner is going to vet in here, and I know we're doing things a little bit differently here, but we're trying to find a sensible way of decreasing the list. So I can understand. So if Mr. Lochner could maybe vet in and give some clarity, that greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I wonder if we can get that slide up again to Councillor's point. Thank you. I think that there are several components of this. What we're recommending is moving forward on these particular aspects. The concerns that Councillor Verbanovich raised are very real. The second part of this is advocacy to the province around the 6.6 million, which I believe turns to 10 million in 2023. Our ability to provide more service during the day is dependent on those factors unless council wish to invest more money in this particular piece. Our recommendation is to wait to see how the province responds and then bring forward that part of the discussion early in the new year. And and really move forward on these today because of the urgency of the situation. So I don't know if that addresses the councillor's concerns that we move forward on these and then commit to bringing back again the ability to expand to daytime hours following the budget.
And so my understanding, to be clear, is that the motion's only to adopt the investment plan as part of the budget. The final budget still will need to be ratified, and any adjustments accordingly would be brought to our attention. Correct? Okay. So that being said, we'll continue down the list of names here. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My preference would be that we deal with it today. In the budget process for 21, we did make a commitment to add a 0.5% levy to the tax levy for housing, and then staff realized some of the challenges we're having in the region, along with the point in time survey that we had. And so this additional funding, I think we approved at committee about 2 weeks ago. And so I think it would be appropriate to move forward. And I think, the part of Councilor Urbanovic's concern, the 2.4 million, I think that was identified in the point in time of the extra work or extra money that had to be spent. We recognize we don't want to go back the way we were pre-COVID, that money is now being built into it for the full wraparound and as much of the 24-hour services that we could get. And so I think we've made that commitment for the 2022 budget, and we also approved it at committee. So my preference would be that we would support it today.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Councillor Galway. Thank you, Councillor Galway.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I agree with Councillor Erb and Councillor Urbanovic. I think we can go ahead and approve the motion that's in front of us today, but we're only sitting today as committee of the whole. So anything that happens here today, unless there's a special council meeting, such as there is after this meeting, that's going to deal with the user rates and codify them with all the necessary bylaws, then anything we're discussing, deciding today is still to a further consideration on budget day or one of the other budget days. And so I don't see any need to defer the matter. I think we can decide on it. And then if Councillor Urbanovic has some amendments or changes that he wishes to propose with some additional information from staff, then that could certainly be taken out of all the different, the recommendations coming from this meeting today could be dealt with separately, as is usually the case, and that discussion and amendments, if appropriate, can be made. So I think we can proceed to vote on these so that staff have some good direction, and then still have one more opportunity on budget day to deal with anything in particular.
Yeah, I thank you for that clarity, Councillor Galway. And I should be clear that we do have a special council meeting after this. Not necessarily will this item make it to that list, but just wanted to be clear in that regard. And certainly that is exactly what we're endeavoring to do, is because staff has to keep going back and changing and adapting as new information comes to the table. But in theory, we could certainly give them a leg up on the process if we're already in agreement. So that being said, I believe Councillor Foxton, you are next.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I meant to take my hand down because Councillor Galloway covered it so completely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Councillor Clark.
Thanks. I just want to clarify something for myself. I think that we've talked about the investments in homelessness and housing. We've also talked about the housing, the Rent Stop program for BIPOC households. I don't think that's captured in the slide on the homelessness and housing investments. I think that's another slide, the equity fund, perhaps. I just want to confirm that I'm right. That's yet another investment that's simply being presented separately.
So we'll seek clarity on that, if you don't mind, Mr. Dyer.
Yes, Councillor Clark is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Urbanovich.
Thanks. And you know, I think Councillor Galloway made some good points. I'm comfortable with supporting that as long as that's the understanding that we'll have an opportunity to come back at it on budget day. So I am supportive of the recommendations that Councillor Erb is bringing forward.
That's much appreciated. So that means that Craig gets to do more number crunching, which you know he thoroughly enjoys. So thank you for that. Would you like to have the last word here, Mr. Bartholomew Saunders?
I love the idea of having the last word. It so rarely happens.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you, just to clarify and to add on to what Mr. Lochner said, the resolution that's before you is really dealing with the shortfall and the items that come out of the pit count. The things that Councillor Urbanovic was talking about, specifically the services that we're concerned about in that gap period between the or in the morning when shelters close and other services haven't yet opened. I believe that we have sufficient flex in the current budget, realizing that those services will only be needed through till March or April. I believe we're talking about a couple of hours each day. I believe we have enough flexibility in the budget to be able to manage those. So I don't believe we would be coming back asking for more money for those particular pieces, that we're able to manage those. The resolution that's before you is for specific asks that come from the pit count and the shortfall that Mr. Dyer has already spoken to you about. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I'm glad that you did. Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew Saunders. I'm going to call that question. So can I see a show? So we had a motion. Right, you guys got that written down, right? It's been a bit. Okay. So all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you so much for a very healthy discussion. On to the next, Mr. Dyer.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. So next slide is on public transit. We've provided here just a high-level budget summary, but also wanted to highlight in particular the planned service expansion, the planned service expansion for Cambridge in the fall of 2022, as well as the annualization of the service expansion. This was largely the university route restoration that happened this fall. So that's baked into the 2022 budget, as well as the additional hours for Cambridge starting in the fall. And staff are available if there are any questions on that proposed service enhancement.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. I'm not seeing any hands up, and this is just for our information as we move forward, so I'll just have another look. I believe we can move to paramedic service then, sir.
Okay, so similarly, service expansion proposed for paramedic services, 2 additional 12-hour ambulances. This would be proposed for July 1st of next year. Requires 11.3 full-time equivalent positions, as well as 2 additional ambulances. You can see the costs here, and as I said earlier, we'll continue our practice of using the tax stabilization reserve to deal with the lag in provincial funding.
Great. I see no hands. There's no change to the budget, so it's just FYI. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. With respect to climate action, again, I don't think I'll go through the slide. There's some accompanying additional material in the appendices if additional context is required. And again, we have staff available to answer any questions about implementation of this plan in 2022.
Okay, thank you. I think we're free to move forward. Waste management and multi-residential rebates.
Yep. So you can see at the top of this slide the current policy and. With respect to multi-residential units in the region, garbage collection service, is provided where the interior road network allows for the vehicles to access, and where not, a rebate, a partial rebate of costs is provided for areas where that's not possible. And again, this is perhaps a bit of a philosophical matter about whether these types of rebates should be given. Staff acknowledge that municipal services are taxed in this way through property taxes as a public good, which doesn't necessarily reflect the extent to which an individual service is used. And given all of the priorities that have been identified through the business plan exercise over the course of this year, staff are of the view that this program should be discontinued and the funds used for other urgently needed programs in other areas.
Okay, so we're looking for approval for staff to move forward, but I think Councillor Kiefer, you have your hand up. Do you wish to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Mr. Dyer, which I'm not sure he can answer, but I'm liking the fact that there's a rebate situation here. But my concern is that it says the Waterloo region is the only municipality that provides such rebates. What do other municipalities do? Do we know?
Well, I think, Madam Chair, through you, the short answer is they don't do anything.
Okay.
They don't do anything in terms of providing a rebate. They'll have their own policies in place in terms of where they will and where they won't collect. And presumably that to a great extent that's based on ability to access the particular housing units. But this is not something, this is certainly not what would be considered a best practice, not something that that happens to the best of our knowledge across the province.
Okay, the thing is, my concern here is that what kind of a dilemma are we going to be in terms of garbage that is now going to be, people feel, well, we're not going to get a rebate, so we'll just throw the garbage anywhere or dump it anywhere. I'm not sure that something could be worked out where there, is you mentioned it, a collection point for some of these units, or in fact, we're seeing more and more condominium and rental apartments being built, so that in the planning somehow it could be inserted there, so that we don't run into any future problems. But thanks for your answers.
Okay. Thank you.
Much appreciated, Councillor Kiefer. And Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair, how much do we have a ballpark figure on how much this rebate is? How much of an impact is it going to have on the people?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, the rebate is currently $36 per unit.
And how many units? So ballpark total, what are we talking?
Yep, we have some of that information. Perhaps I'll ask Mr. Wilson to take us to the multi-res slide in the appendix. If you just bear with us for one moment.
Of course.
We'd like to say we were clairvoyant and anticipated the question.
I believe you.
So let's see what we have here. So you can see here the number of properties across the left. So this is the distribution of properties that are not eligible for curbside service, and about 83% of those units actually go through the application process. And in total, it represents a budget line of about $1.9 million.
Wow. And the owners of the property will be the ones that will be hit with this, right? I just wonder about the backlash. There's going to be a backlash because we gave a break for so long. Mm-hmm. There's definitely going to be a backlash.
Yeah, it's reasonable, through you, Madam Chair, it would be reasonable to expect that you'll hear from some. Again, the staff recommendation is one that that speaks to the nature of the property tax and the use of those services. I'm not sure if my colleague Mr. Arsenault would like to add or Mr. Schmidt would like to add anything to this at this point.
Through you, Madam Chair, on the previous question, so the other municipalities, they simply do not provide rebates, but what's different is they may provide a different level of service than we do. So they all have their own individual levels of service that would be different, but we are the only one that provides this type of rebate. Councillor Kiefer is also correct that many complexes, if they are designed appropriately, can be accessed by our vehicles, and therefore we provide that service to them. I would also not think that we will see people having garbage around, because these are condo complexes where essentially they're paying a private contractor to come in and collect their garbage. So they wouldn't change that level of service would not change. That would continue, but obviously they wouldn't be getting that rebate. I think there's also from Councillor Fox a question on where is that being paid or who's paying for it. I think we don't really know for sure. So it could be the owner, it could be a condo complex that could be passed on to the condo owners. It could just be, I know for myself, when I was part of a condo complex, we were very happy to have the region be able to come in and collect garbage because the cost of a private contractor is fairly high. But the reality is the garbage still would have been collected, whether by the region or by the private contractor, and whether we got the rebate or not.
Okay, thank you. I just expect a bit of a backlog. Not as much for North Dumfries. I think there was only 5 you had on the list, but for the cities there may be.
Yeah. As Mr. Dyer said, I think we agree that we have had this discussed before, and every time there have been delegations that come forward to speak about this. But I think for the reasons provided by Mr. Dyer, we feel it's the right thing to do. There are many services that municipalities provide. We can't all make use of all of them, and we don't get a rebate for the ones that we don't use. I think that to me anyways is a very important point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that being said, I think we're getting a sense of a read of the Zoom room, Mr. Dyer. So that being said, we'll take this information forward, and ratification will be coming at the next perhaps meeting. So we'll move to the discretionary grants to organizations. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Yes, that is correct, Madam Chair. So as I said in my earlier part of the presentation, we do have a staff report.
It looks like we're all muted.
We're still not hearing you, Mr. Dyer.
I think he's muted.
Can anybody hear me?
Yep, there we go.
Now we can.
Now we can.
Okay, perhaps I'll just go right back to the start. So as I described earlier, we have a briefing note on the agenda today with respect to discretionary grants to organizations coming out of the KPMG service review update, discussion at the service review steering committee in the fall of 2020 led to a recommendation for status quo for 2021, but also directed staff to go back and do some more work on grant programs. That work has been completed. Staff have put forward the briefing note in your agenda today, which recommends, among other things, the development of a comprehensive policy, discontinuing or pausing certain grant streams that no longer have perhaps the desired impact or effect in the community, and also using our equity funds as well as some additional municipal accommodation tax revenues in order to offset the overall cost and to find a way to fit this in within our overall budget. Represents a savings overall, a levy savings, for lack of a better term, of $314,000. That's built into the budget at this point. And Madam Chair, we have staff available to help answer any questions on the staff report.
Much appreciated. And just remind everyone that we have several delegations this evening, so that might have an impact on this choice. Councillor Jaworski, please proceed.
Thank you, through the chair, and this is a comment to my colleagues. I think, as the chair just mentioned, we have numerous delegations on this topic tonight, notwithstanding the fact that this is only committee and no decisions are final. It might be best that we not only perceive to have an open mind, that we actually, don't express comments, don't debate this yet today, and consider deferring this to another time. Can hear the comments of our good citizens who are coming here tonight. And, I think Mr. Dyer and staff have given us great information on how we got to this point. That will give extra input for citizens to give their suggestions tonight. But depending, there's other hands up, Chair, so I'll let they'll go forward. But I think we should consider a deferral at this time.
Is that a motion, Councillor Jaworski? I'd like
let's hear what my other colleagues have to say and then come back to me.
Appreciate that. I believe next was Councillor Ravanovich.
Thanks very much, Chair Jowett, and thanks to my colleague, Councillor Jaworski, for raising this. I would certainly be supportive of a deferral in terms of this issue, so that we can get additional information. I may not be quite as reserved in terms of my comments as he was. I do acknowledge that staff were to go away and develop a policy that could potentially guide this. I'm not sure, quite frankly, that we've landed where that policy needs to be. Particularly coming out of the pandemic. And as we strive to build the world-class community that we so often talk about from a live, work, and play perspective, these are, many of these things are the exact kinds of things that are quality of life issues that our residents expect, and quite frankly, coming out of a pandemic are more critical than ever. I can tell you from anything that we've done as a municipality, from an event point of view, the uptake is beyond belief. I mean, it sells out in terms of registrations before, like, within hours, if not less. And I mean, even Mayor Jaworski will recall last year in terms of his drive-through Santa Claus parade. And I know we had the same thing again this year. The streams of people that come through that kind of stuff is huge. So I am prepared to support the deferral, but I would also ask that staff come back and provide advice if we were not going to find $314,000 in savings in this area, but in fact leave it so it can be allocated back into investing in some of these events, how we would fund that. And so if that can come back for budget day, I would appreciate that.
Okay, much appreciated, Councillor Verbanovich. Councillor Galloway, we're going to let you speak, but I also want to let everyone know that Helen Schmery Russell is on the call and would like to provide some clarity. So if you'd like to proceed, Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do want to concur completely with both Councillor Jaworski and Verbanovich. The matter needs to be deferred, I believe. Sometimes process is important. It has to be fair, but also has to be perceived to be fair. And I think we certainly can't have a serious discussion on some of these matters when the public hasn't yet been heard on some of these specific issues. So I think it's best for all parties to have this deferred. And I also do want to say that for a relatively small amount of money that these organizations receive, we get a tremendous amount of value, and sometimes it's very difficult to pigeonhole different programs, services into boxes that, have certain outcomes. And I think we're in a situation where we're looking at some of those. So I support the deferral, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Helen Shimry Russell, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
There she is. Oh, new glasses.
Yeah, just for this. So I suppose I'll give the policy context that we were, so last budget cycle, we were asked to go away and come up with a recommendation on moving forward. And this is through a review of our current policies and practices that we have in place, a recommendation about how to proceed. And I think the moment in time and the opportunity we have here is either we close the door to one-off events or we open it up to make it more equitable and inclusive and transparent. And so that's the policy decision that we're being asked to make today, or defer until larger conversation.
That's appreciated. Okay, and so as I'm reading the room, I think the deferral seems to be the preferred option. So I'm going to ask Councillor Jaworski to confirm that deferral motion, please.
I move the deferral, and we should note Councillor Verbanovic's interest in the budget savings aspect. I think that was quite clear.
Much appreciated. And seconded by? Do we have a seconder? Is that?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please use your little green buttons. And that is carried. Thank you. And we move on to the regional bunker. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've summarized the matter here on this slide. As I said earlier, a staff report from I believe late August, early September, a referral to Budget Committee by Council on September the 14th. You can see the three recommendations that came from committee to Council. That was what was referred to Budget Committee. And so we would say, so in terms of what's in the budget right now, we have in the draft budget, the funding, the money to undertake the immediate repair work in 2022, and then the development of a multi-use facility in 23 and 24. I think the options available for committee are to either support the wording, support the motions as referred to Budget Committee, or if that's not supported, the alternative motion would be to direct staff to decommission the bunker and amend the capital program accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. I see Councillor Clark is up first.
Thanks, Chair. If the time is right, because I'm a little confused about timing at this point, I do want to move this. I think this is an important asset of the regions and of our communities that we need to do what we can to preserve. And I'd remind my colleagues that we did just spend $100,000 on an event that is very in nature, doesn't belong to us, isn't an asset of ours. And I'd just like to offer that to put some context into this particular issue.
There are no other comments in the queue, so I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Clark, to your motion. Thank you, Chair Redmond. And can I ask you to vote with your green buttons? Oh, I shouldn't be saying what color to use, should I really? I'm getting punchy, I apologize. And, Will, is that carried? And that is carried. Thanks, everyone, for your indulgence. And we'll move to the next item. Mr. Dyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff report on page 68 of your agenda today. We've tried to very hard to summarize a staff report in one slide, but we've attempted here just to outline some of the objectives and planned outcomes and summarize the recommendations with respect to proposed funding for Wellbeing Waterloo Region, proposed funding for the community justice initiatives, and on the basis and understanding that both organizations would find ongoing funding from a sustainability perspective by the end of that 2-year period. And again, we have staff available to help answer any questions.
And that's appreciated. And I'm looking to my right here to see the hands coming up. They're very small. I don't see any hands. Are you, oh, there it is. Okay, Councillor Galloway, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I support the recommendations in principle with the Wellbeing Waterloo region. No problem with that. And I really want to thank staff in regards to the Community Justice Initiative's Crime Prevention Council initiative that we have in front of us here today as well. I think this is just a great opportunity for Crime Prevention Council and along with community justice initiatives to create something really special and really transformative in our community. You know, we spent 28 years having the Crime Prevention Council under the regional umbrella. It's kind of like having an adult child that you're spinning off into the world and hoping that it does well, and asking an organization like Community Justice Initiatives to join forces with it and let it flourish. So I have great hopes for this initiative and can fully support it. There are two things within the staff report that I would like to discuss and propose alternatives for. The first is the funding. The proposal from the two organizations did request a 5-year funding commitment, and this new entity that's envisioned is not like an organization that we're contracting with to provide a service such as we do with childcare and a variety of other services. This is more a collaborative advocacy effort that the region really still wants to be a part of. And in order for this kind of an organization to take root in the community and be able to become self-sufficient, it's certainly going to take more than 2 years to find those kinds of programs, those kinds of funders, foundations, private donors, provincial or federal programs to bring it to a self-sustaining position, at least on the financial stage. And in any event, Regional Council has the ability at any point in time to review anybody's grant. And indeed, we're doing that with other organizations, just as we spoke a few minutes ago. And if the efficacy of that organization is not good, or if it doesn't fit the strategic goals any longer of the region, it can be revisited. But the decision of this particular council, of course, does not bind the hands of a future council, and the future council is less now than a year away. So I really would like to see us go with the 5-year commitment. It provides CJI with some comfort. It provides the community, the organizations who are collaborating on this particular initiative that provides staff time, 8 or 9 full-time equivalents provided through the various organizations that sit on the Crime Prevention Council. It provides them with the confidence that this is going to be around for a significant amount of time. It provides the confidence of other funders, foundations, and local philanthropists, or even other levels of government, the confidence that it's something that's going to be around for a while as well. So I really appreciate what staff have done. I think we have a fair level of enthusiasm for the potential of the organization, but I do think on this particular matter, we should be providing them with a greater level of funding assurance. And on the second matter I wanted to raise is the use of the Governor House and jail as far as the facility is concerned. And this may well be relegated better to the operating agreement that is anticipated in the report. that would be put together between the region and CJI and the new entity, and it could be dealt with in that, and would be in fact, I'm sure, dealt with in that particular document. CJI is having accommodation issues themselves right now. You're probably aware that they're located at St. Peter's Church. St. Peter's Church is close to being completely redeveloped into a completely new type of facility, which would likely require the exit of CJI. So their accommodation is precarious at this point in time, and they're looking at some other alternatives. And I'm hoping that we can provide a longer length of time that they could continue to use the governor's house and jail, obviously at the same costs, rent, or internal charges that are currently being incurred. So on those two matters, Madam Chair, I'd like to have this particular recommendation move forward with those changes.
Okay, so I appreciate the comments. It looks like our next speaker is Chair Redmond, and then of course Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I'm very excited about the prospect of this new relationship between Community Justice Initiatives and Crime Prevention Council. And when they, when I was first talking to Chris Cowie and to the principals of Crime Prevention Council, I think there are amazing synergies that will come to being with the launch of this new entity. And I really hope that the 2 years of predictable funding would set them up for success. I really hope they are successful. And I know that they're going to have to continue to hammer out some of the details. I also wanted to speak to the investment in Wellbeing Waterloo Region of $250,000 and point out that both of these initiatives are years old, and we have been making investment as a region for a very long time in animating the community in order to look at preventative measures, which are now usually called Upstream. So I just would say I really support the recommendations and the policy direction that we're going to continue investing as a region, and I look forward to seeing what this new entity looks like and seeing Wellbeing Waterloo Region to continue to doing their good work in the community.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I first off wanted to say that Councillor Galloway and I are the two Waterloo Region reps that have sat throughout this term of council on Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council. We've been very close to the ground with some of the ongoing discussion about the future and some of the strategies that both organizations, Crime Prevention Council and CGI, have been looking at in order to continue the work and potentially form a new entity. I would want to point out a couple of things. Number one, I fully agree with Tom on both his recommendations, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I think more importantly, we as a community, we as Waterloo Region residents have supported the initiative of Crime Prevention Council now for 28 years, and we have invested time, effort. Those of us that have volunteered on that organization have certainly made it not only a very successful Crime Prevention Council here, but we have also been recognized nationally as well as internationally for our work, and we've often provided support and assistance for other communities who are looking at bringing these good initiatives in. And that being said, I also wanted to suggest, as Councillor Galloway did, that in order to set up a potential new entity for success, 2 years of funding is not enough, especially as we're coming out of a pandemic. You know, we want to ensure that the return on investment that we've made as a region is not going to waste in setting them up for failure if we don't support the initiative long enough in order to be able to get underway. Coming out of the pandemic, we know that there's been some changes. We've been talking about that here in the budget process on some organizations or other potential funders that might want to fund this initiative moving ahead. We need a longer transition time as companies try and scale up again and figure out what and how they're going to achieve funding very good initiatives in Waterloo Region. So I would say I would agree with Councillor Galloway that we do need the full 5 years of funding. That signals to potential investors and potential funders that this is an organization that's going to grow and thrive. And I also would support the call to continue with the space for some longer time so that this new entity has a chance to figure out where they can land, given the fact that CGI is under the gun with where they are at. So I did want to just strongly suggest that as somebody who's been certainly a champion and a participant as a member of Crime Prevention Council almost since 2007, I really do believe that setting it up for success will really assist in social development issues that can help provide our families in Waterloo Region what they need in order to bring them towards a healthy, safer community, but in a way that addresses some of the calls for services that we have in other social services organizations. So that's my comments. I would fully support what Councillor Galloway says. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGarry. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. And through the chair, playing the devil's advocate, as I've been known to do, I don't see them as a new entity. I believe the funders they have today will be coming forward with them. And they will be seeking more funders because they're going to be a phenomenal group in the community. So I don't see them as a new entity. I see them as a stronger coming together of two very great entities. And I can support the 2 years, at which time we can look at it again. If they at that time need further funding, they can approach us then. Our budget does not for 10 years. We reevaluate every year so 2 years coming back, not an issue. In regards to the governor's house, I'd like to see if we can make that available. To me, that makes sense because it is already a recognized facility for the crime prevention group. Having the justice group move in with them because they're losing space, to me, it seems logical. I would need to see basically a report on it on how we can make that work. But I can support the 2 years for now with a reevaluation in 2 years should they need it. But I think they're a dynamic group that are going to do very well.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the record, I think that I'm fine with the discussion of the funding of the Justice Center. However, if we're going to get into conversation about the region providing accommodation to another agency, then I think I need to declare an indirect pecuniary conflict of interest due to my employment with the YW, simply because of the precedent that would be involved.
Much understood. Okay. So that being said, we are standing with the. Oh, sorry, Councillor Foxton. Is that a legacy hand?
No, I was just going to quickly say that actually I just directing staff to let us know in the future today. So
I'm sorry, I missed that, Councillor Foxton.
I was just requesting staff let us know what it would cost and what is going to happen in the future should we allow Governor's House to be used continuously.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So here we stand. We can either accept the motion as recommended, defer, or amend. So where do we want to go? Should we get it on the table? Councillor McGarry.
Thank you. It is certainly my intention to amend the motion in order to provide a 5-year funding framework. So I'm not sure if we wanted to deal with all that today or in the future, but I'll leave that to you, Madam Chair.
Much appreciated. So I'm kind of looking around. Do we want staff to prepare more information? Do we want to separate the two pieces of discussion? On what I'm assuming would be Councillor McGarry's looking at amending based on the year's funding. And then the second item would be the housing of the new entity. I'll ask Councillor Foxton to provide commentary.
I was just going to say, I thought she only the 5 years for the new entity, not for
Yes.
Wellbeing Waterloo Region. But she'd have to clarify that, and also where they're going to be housed. I think that's needs further information. I'd like to defer the housing type thing till staff can get back to us.
Makes sense. Sorry. So Councillor McGarry, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if we can separate out the discussion on both items regarding Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council, both their space as well as the funding from the rest of the policy recommendations that are listed here, and deal with those separately.
That makes sense, I think, if I'm reading everybody correctly. So do we need a minute to separate those two out to make sure that we have? So, Councillor Galloway, we're looking for some clarity from you for the motion with regard to housing the entity and what you're looking at from a little bit more detailed perspective. Are you able to bring that forward to us?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that should be separate, and I would just refer that to staff for this particular purpose. We may need more information and the implications associated with that. And that, I think, could be subject to some discussion at a future date. Maybe even after the budget's approved, because I'm not sure there's a huge consequence, financial consequence. But in terms of the 2-year, 5-year, I would like to deal with that, and I would certainly, if you're taking a motion or would take a motion in that regard, I would so move.
So I think what I'm going to suggest is that we put the first motion on the table, which is the deferral or the direction to staff to provide more information on the space. Right? Does that make sense that we defer that, look for a motion to defer that or put that back to staff? We can just do that? Okay, so that's fine. Yes, I understand, Councillor Galloway. That's direction to staff. So we'll separate that out from here because it's already been now accepted as direction to staff. And so now we'll just make clear that amendment with Mr. Anderson, who's typing it up, right? Or sorry, Mr. Brubaker's typing it up. Just CJI? No, not Wellbeing Waterloo Region. We're specifically speaking to the extension for CJI. Is that correct? Is that how I'm to understand it, Councillor McGarry?
Crime Prevention Council.
Crime Prevention Council.
Yeah, the new entity that would be comprised of CJI as well as the Crime Prevention Council.
Got it. That makes sense. So we're working on it. We should have someone who can do drum rolls while we're...
I don't think you want me to do a musical interlude, but I could hum.
Well, Sue's our singer. She could belt something out.
Rather to her than myself. I've been with her when she's singing and I drop my voice down, so hers takes over.
Okay, so it looks like it's been altered accordingly. So if everyone can just have a... Yes, I do. I need a vote on the amendment. So Councillor McGarry has made the amendment. I'm looking for a seconder to that. I don't want to make a big assumption, but I would think that Councillor Galloway would second that. Councillor Galloway, would you second that?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I couldn't see your hand. Oh, we are now voting on Councillor McGarry's amendment. So I'd ask you to use your icons, and I'm not even going to tell you which color to use. Yes, it's carried, but I can see Councillor Clark wants to speak. Would you like to do so?
Sorry, I'm not clear on what we're voting on. The material that was in front of us did not look to me like the amendment.
It was the amendment the portion with which Councillor McGarry had selected, which extended the funding.
Can you highlight that section of it?
We'll highlight that for you, Councillor Clark, so it's more clear.
Chair, Councillor Clark, it was the exact same motion, but the number 2 was striked out and the number 5 was put in.
There it is. That's been isolated for staff direction. Oh, okay, Councillor Clark, just so that you're aware, because I understand the sensitivity here. It's the second portion of the commentary around the governor's house, is it? Yeah, that has been isolated for staff direction. So your conflict of interest is not of concern at this particular time.
What was concerning me or confusing me was I couldn't see the cross out, so it looked like 2 5 years. I couldn't actually see that it was marked out. Thank you.
I see. I understand perfectly now. So I'm going to ask you all again, just to be official, to make that vote, Councillor Clark, so that I can include you in the numbers. So if everyone can.
Sure.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Urbanovic, would you like to speak?
Yes, please, if I can, Madam Chair. Just, I guess, a couple questions on this, because certainly liking the direction that we're going, and in principle, I think, this kind of transition does take time. I guess I have 2 questions, though, as we're looking at this transition, that, before we approve the money in 5 years, or direction to create a contract, there's a couple components that I'm wondering if they're going to come back to us as council. And one is, what are the objectives and the outcomes we're hoping this new entity is going to achieve, as we make this transition. And secondly, one of the successes of the former, or not former, but the current still committee, has been the collaboration with Waterloo Regional Police Service. And I'm just wondering how that's being integrated as part of this going forward.
And so I'm looking for someone who can respond to the. Are you okay with that, Mr. Lochner? Please proceed.
Yes, I'll try, Madam Chair. So yes, outcomes we would define in a funding arrangement similar to arrangements that we have with other corporations. And we could bring that back to council if that's desired. I think in terms of participation of other parties, that would be up to the organization that we are funding. If council wishes that we are explicit in who that includes, we would take that under advisement as well.
So I guess, before I'm prepared to approve this, I guess what I would say is that the agreement should come back to us, and that I guess we'll be looking towards those objectives and outcomes, and also an outline of community partner, to be included, because I think those need to also include, the lower tier municipalities and others, and so we want to make sure that this actually grows and takes us to the next level, and doesn't perhaps, step us away from some of the successes that we've seen that I know I've heard both Catherine and Tom talk about in the past, and I've certainly experienced as well.
Much appreciated. So I can tell you, you can tell I'm a newbie with budget chairing because I thought we passed that and now we're back to, I apologize. I mean, no disrespect to my colleagues, so I will indulge the handies that are before me, certainly. Councillor McGarry, I believe you are first up.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple of comments that the funding that has been ongoing for 28 years for Crime Prevention Council has been regional money only. I would also suggest that there are many different organizations and individuals throughout all the area municipalities that have sat on Prevention Council over the years. I would also suggest, and I would sort of also look to my my Crime Prevention Council colleague, Councillor Galloway, regarding some of the discussion. I would tell you that these are early stages, Councillor Bravanovich, through the chair, that I'm not sure yet who's going to be sitting on where. Those are kind of the ongoing discussion that will be occurring naturally as they sort of get the direction. I think we're potentially getting ahead of ourselves, because if it's a new entity, it would be the new entity that would be deciding on the membership. So for us to dictate it isn't necessarily adequate. There may be some provision, as Mr. Lochner has said, for them to come back and said, okay, now we're getting going. Here's what it looks like. Here's what the membership is, and to have a reporting structure like that. So that's just a couple of comments.
So just as a follow-up question then, Councillor McGarry, I mean, could, would it be reasonable then that we approved this in principle, but that the agreement would come back as after staff negotiated that, and some of this other stuff that you talk about can happen in the meantime?
Through Madam Chair, I would actually defer to probably Mr. Lochner for that kind of question. Thank you.
Most definitely. Mr. Lochner, do you want to make a comment, or is it a bit premature? I mean, I don't want to. It is premature. I think what we're talking about here is something that's a latter discussion, if you will, and so I appreciate that. We're already blue skying it, but I think we should let staff find a way for a response. Okay. Yep, you do. Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just say the details for sure, but bringing it back to council sounds wise. I mean, there's a range of opinions, and I think it's prudent to bring it back.
Much appreciated. Okay, and so we still have Councillor Galloway. You can go next, and then we'll give our chair the final word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in response to Councillor Bravanovich, the proposal that was presented to us jointly by CJI and by the Crime Prevention Council has their objectives and their goals, and we've been a part of them. And in regards to the participation of the Waterloo Region Police, they do have 2 positions currently on the Crime Prevention Council, and I don't think there's any change likely to occur in that. So they will continue to have a significant presence on the Crime Prevention Council as well. So I don't have any problem with the agreement coming back. That's fine if council wants to take another look at it. But I think fundamental issues here are that we're accepting the proposal, we're giving them 5 years, and we're going to have a further discussion on the accommodation piece. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair Redmond?
Thank you, Chair Jowett. I just would really concur with Councillor Bravanovich and say that I do believe that this is support in principle. I do want to see this new entity succeed, and it's been a lot of work. It's been years of work, probably a couple years of work from Crime Prevention Council as well as community justice initiatives. And I don't know that they're going to be able to clarify some of the things, Councillor Bravanovich, that you're identifying, but I think all of council would like that clarification. It's one of the reasons why I personally thought the 2 years and having sort of the new entity, give them 6 to 8 months to clarify those things made a lot of sense to me. So I hope that we are setting them up for success. I support the vision and the synergies that are possible. I think there are a lot of moving parts right now. And so supporting this in principle, referring some of the aspects to staff makes a whole lot of sense, because I would hate to see this hurried up in a way that made it unsuccessful. And on the other hand, I do believe there's an absolute role for them to play, and I don't want to wait around a whole long time for them to clarify those things. So totally support that we move forward, and they have had the support of council, and we can move on.
All right, much appreciated. Okay, thank you, everyone. The vote did carry, but I still appreciate the after comments. So thank you very much. We are on our final. Are we on our final, Craig, or am I pushing it? Oh, right. Okay. So, I thought we took. Okay, so So now I have to put the question out on the rest of it.
So there was the motion. There was Catherine McGarry.
There's Catherine.
Amendment.
Yep.
We carried.
Yep.
Now we are voting on the motion as amended, to carry that, because there was back and forth on
Given the fact that there was lots of questions after the fact, we do have to put the motion, to be clear, back on the table, correct? As amended. So I'm sorry to do that to you guys, but we have to. So it's just,
Tim can share.
so the full motion,
Tim has it.
can you, and can I have the mover and seconder again? Just to make sure we got our ducks in a row. Thank you, Catherine. Sorry, Councillor McGarry. And who was seconded? Councillor Galloway. All those in favor? Councillor Foxton, would you like to speak to this? Legacy hand?
No, that was my check mark. I apologize.
No worries. This one's just, I'll call this one the stickiest one we've had. Okay. So, and that is carried. Thanks, everybody. Sorry about that. I got to direct traffic better, guys. Okay. Take it away, Mr. Dyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next item for the committee's consideration is the grant request from the University of Waterloo. You'll recall that the university delegated before council, I believe it was back in February, and also at the November 1st public meeting with a request for a $5 million capital grant towards their fundraising campaign for the construction of the Eye Institute. Briefing note is before you on the agenda, outlines the staff view, which is that there is no direct connection between the work of the Institute and the mandate of public health. And also that we have, as we've talked about as recently as the November 1st meeting, the significant funding and financing challenges we have with respect to our own capital program. As such, staff recommend no action with respect to the request for a capital grant.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. So I see we have our list commencing here, and the first one is Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. To this is more to my colleagues, really, and I feel in some way that it's kind of like Mr. Dyer is a veterinarian, and I've taken my dog and looking for advice on what to do with my dog, and I come in with all hope. I get the wise information that the veterinarian shakes his head and looks down and says, unfortunately, there is no hope. And so I continued to look for hope and ideas, and I really reflected on us as part of the MUSH sector, municipalities, universities, school boards, and hospitals, and think about our funding models and where we get money from. And it's sort of a sad day when the MUSH sector starts asking each other for money. And it's something that's very tough, and I do very much value this this program here in our community, and have been personally helping out in terms of getting bringing it to people's attention who might be able to support it in a personal or business way. And yet, when I look at the demands that we've seen in the past few hours here, and I guess I'm still waiting for my 3:30 break, Chair, but we have so many demands of what we have in our own house, and if only we wished that we could find a spare $5 million under that regional mattress that we forgot about, or something like that. But this is something that I've reflected on personally for quite some time, and I've come to appreciate staff's analysis, and I really think taking no action really describes that it doesn't mean we don't think the idea isn't excellent. It's more of an internal reflection that we have no money to cover the pressures ourselves that we're dealing with. And perhaps other colleagues or Councillor Erb have had reflections as well. And I'd appreciate hearing those. But I thought I'd be first out of the gate as certainly representing Waterloo as Councillor Erb and Councillor Strickland do, and giving my personal reflections of where I'm currently landing. Thank you.
So Councillor Jaworski, are you making a motion or not?
As always, I will listen to my wise councillors as well before I move forward.
Much appreciated. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would echo many of the comments that that Councillor Jaworski has made. There's no question that this is going to be a significant addition to the services that the university provides and to the healthcare sector in the region and beyond. However, I think the demands on our capital budget at the moment, just the funds aren't there to support this. And you know, one of the good things for me in this whole thing is the university has had an incredible capacity to raise money. And so I'm confident that going forward, they're going to be able to raise the money from the supporters of the university to fund this adequately. And at the end of the day, if we give the $5 million or not, it's going to happen. So I would support the recommendation that's coming forth from staff that we take no action on this based on the commitments that we have in our capital budget going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, like Councillors Jaworski and Councillor Erb, I too am very big on this particular project, but I agree with them as well in terms of that we can't do this from our capital perspective at this time. So I agree with staff. But you know, having said that, if there's anything regionally we can do to promote, and I know Councillor Jaworski, Councillor Erb are doing that. I'm doing it as much as I can. I mean, I waited 3 years before my cataract operations could happen, and that's the type of thing that's going on out there in the medical community right now. People are having long waits to get their procedures done. There's no doubt in my mind, of course, that the University of Waterloo is the School of Optometry is a world-class operation, and this will just add to that world-class operation. I'm hoping that the provincial and federal governments will step up and as we all do, hope that they'll put some more money into it. But I support staff's recommendation on this. I think they're right on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kiefer. Councillor Urbanovic.
Thanks, Chair Jowett, and I certainly respect where all of my colleagues are coming from, and I struggle with this a little bit as well. I do note that certainly the university does have the ability to be a strong fundraising machine when they need to be. But I also recognize the benefit of the kinds of collaborations that have resulted in the School of Pharmacy downtown, the School of Architecture in Cambridge, the new Health Innovation Arena in Kitchener, and quite frankly, the Satellite Med School that this region was a part of. And increasingly, not just in this community, but in communities across the province, there is a look to see these kinds of community collaborations and community investment coming forward that then, spurs provincial investment and investment from others into these projects to help them go forward. And so I do worry that we're while I understand the fiscal constraints, I wonder if we really explored all of the ways that this can occur. As an example, it'd be quite common from the donor community that the university would not receive all of their money at one time, that in fact it would happen over a 5 or 10 year period, which may be much more manageable for us as a potential contributing partner. I do think that, this is not, probably not the last request that we're going to need to be dealing with in this space. All of us know that for many years there's been talk around, the future of healthcare in this region, and is it time for us to see some of the investment that has happened from other orders of government that we've seen in North Toronto, that we've seen in Oakville, that we've seen down in Niagara, and so on. And I'm just worried that we may not be, creating a signal that may make things, if and when those opportunities ever do come along in the future, that perhaps we're just not sending a good signal. So I would, personally, I would prefer to see us, send this back to see if there are ways we could do this over a number of years as opposed to a one-time funding. But in the absence of that, I could not support no action.
So we have a motion on the floor, and I have a mover for it. So I guess at this point, am I looking for a seconder? I'm just looking for a mover. Okay, I'm looking for a mover. Staff's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Clark, seconder, Councillor Kiefer. And use your magic buttons, please, and let us know. And that's carried, folks. So that is I believe, sir, I'm looking to you, my partner in crime today. What say you?
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Just a quick recap on, excuse me, on next steps. Public meeting this evening, presentation from Waterloo Regional Police Services on Monday afternoon. I believe that's a 1 o'clock start. And then Budget Committee will be back together on the 8th and the 15th in order to conclude its deliberations on the 2022 budget.
Much appreciated, sir. So we have special counsel at 6, and Tom, I don't want you to get mad, but tonight I'm having poutine, and we want to kind of make sure we can. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Ravanovich.
Sorry, Chair Jowett, and I'm not sure if I missed this somehow, but I'm wondering when we're going to be dealing with things like the River Road issue.
Oh. That's not on this agenda. Oh, certainly proceed. Sir.
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, included in the slide deck that was put together for today and circulated last week is a series of appendices. I should have mentioned this earlier, so my apologies. And that appendix includes information, additional information on some of the items we've talked about today. It also includes responses to a number of requests from councillors from the November 1st meeting. And it also includes some follow-up on a couple of items that were raised at the public input meeting on November the 1st. So included in that set of slides, I think it's right near the end, is a description of the transportation capital program and specifically the River Road project, what's in the 10-year capital program this year, what was in last year, and I think a little bit of language around why the capital program shows up the way it is. So our hope is that through that set of slides, we've responded to information about assessment growth, about the River Road project, and other items that would have come up back on November 1st. And if any additional information is required, then we're certainly happy to bring that back on December the 8th.
So, Madam Chair, then if I can, if I can speak to this, I think as council is aware, this council gave very clear and unanimous, if I recall, direction last year during the capital budget pertaining to the River Road extension and the timing of it. And there was a recommendation from staff not to proceed with it in the timing that had previously been contemplated, and council gave different direction. Now we're seeing it in front of us again, looking to delay it, which was not the direction that came from this council, and that's admittedly causing me some concern. This is a project that has been on the books for many years, and really does need to move forward for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which is the continued pressures on transportation flows in that part of the city of Kitchener. And so I would ask, I get some surprise that it's getting moved again, or staff are proposing that. But then if there's need for it to get it back on where the direction we gave last year, then I would move that staff bring a report back on budget day, how we're going to get it back to the timing that we approved last year.
So that we're seeing that as direction to staff. So we'll have a drilled down version of that concern because it was on today's agenda through the slide deck. Would you concur with that, Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, if there's a need for additional information over and above what's been supplied today, then we'll look to bring that back either on the 8th or the 15th.
Much appreciated. I think that's where Councillor Galloway was going with that. So we'll accommodate that for sure. Councillor Galloway. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. and that's fine. I mean, it's like from my perspective, it was looking for it to come back and looking for, what's going to be moved in order to put it back to where the direction we gave last year.
Understood. Okay. And Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to agree with Councillor Vanovic on this. It's a bit incongruent to me. We're already starting to build this particular road. The bridge over the Schneider Creek is well under construction, and that leg between Manitou and Wilson Avenue is soon to be finished. And that we would delay the actual use then of that particular facility for so many years doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it'll be a road kind of going to nowhere. But also, well, not exactly a road to nowhere, but it certainly won't function very, very well. And the other concern I have has to do with, and maybe staff could comment on this if they're coming back, is the importance of the highway crossing vis-a-vis stage 2 of the ION. So my understanding is that the route for stage 2 ION will potentially use the new infrastructure that is intended to go over the highway, or somehow or another is going to be related to that, and how the timing of the project could be affected. Both projects could be affected. So, we're really looking forward to the active transportation infrastructure associated with this new link. And it's a part of the community that really is void of any good active transportation infrastructure. And Councillor Veronica is correct in terms of council trying to move this forward after years and years of delay due to Jefferson salamanders and all other kinds of good reasons, that we were on a track to get this completed. So I'm hoping that maybe we could review that.
Okay, so Councillor, I think the point has been taken very clearly, and I believe that staff is going to return with more information at our next meeting. And we have a special council meeting at. So we do need our motion to adjourn, but we do have a special council meeting, and delegations are many this evening. So I guess I'd like to see that happen sooner rather than later. Thank you, Councillor Foxton, for that motion. Seconded by. Thank you, Councillor McGarry. All those in favor, please use your green ones. I'm actually saying, please use your green ones. That's carried. Thank you so much, everyone. I know. Give us 10 minutes. We'll get you sorted out. We'll have our special counsel. We'll have our chair.